Well, welcome to Grace this weekend. Thanks for being here. Happy Daylight Savings Weekend. Who's excited? Yeah. I said hi to some of you, and you just grunted in the hallway. It's great. Well, my name's Ryan. If we haven't met yet, campus pastor here. We're Akron East campus of Grace Church. And a few things I want to mention real quick before we jump into our conversation today. Easter is coming. That is very surprising to many of us, to me too. I'm like, oh man, it's coming quick. Spring is on its way. And we're going to be adding another service to kind of accommodate for guests we might be inviting for that weekend. And so as you make plans maybe to be here, if you're going to be in town, maybe think about going to either the early service or the late service. So check the times out and make sure to RSVP if you can. As we try to make plans and do our very best to accommodate for everybody. That would be super, super helpful. And of course, also plan to come to communion. That's going to be coming up here on Good Friday, and that is a meaningful time just to gather together and remember the sacrifice of Christ. We'll be talking more about that here in the weeks to come, but want to make sure it's on your radar. And excited about this series we jumped into last weekend called Extra Life. Just love it. Love the whole concept and the idea and kind of where we're going in this series. And we just said it is inevitable that, like our little buddy in kind of the opening video here, that we're going to get bumped in life. We're going to get hit by a boulder. And when that happens, man, we got to go out of our way, just like the old school video games, to go get extra life. And it takes some effort to go get that life and to kind of get restored and to operate and to live out of the abundant life really that Jesus called us to. It's actually something that Jesus promised us. He said, I've come that you might have life and have it to the full, or have it in abundance is the idea. And a lot of what that means is that there is a quality of life that Jesus died to give us. He wants us to operate in a place of peace and joy and purpose. Those things that we long for, he longs for us to have as well. And all of that comes from having a relationship with Christ. And so we want to talk about what's our part in seeing that come into fruition. What effort do I need to put forward to see that extra life kind of restored in me to make sure that I'm living the abundant life Jesus died to give me. So here's a lot of what we've been talking about as we opened this series just last weekend. We open up with this phrase, and I think we're going to continue to revisit this. We said we want to do the things that take effort but give life. Things that take effort but give life. And I think it's just a principle in life in general that all of us could lock into. Man, if I want to have basically anything that's worth having, it's going to take a little bit of effort. If I want to have a great marriage, I'm going to have to put some time and work into that marriage. If I want great friendship, same thing. If I want to pursue a skill, I need to put time and effort into that. And certainly, even in my relationship with Christ, and even in my managing of difficulties in this life, if I want to find that extra life, it's going to take a little bit of effort. And I want to make sure, of course, we're always crystal clear. We'll never say and we'll never teach here that you use effort to earn salvation. That is not what we believe. We believe that salvation is a free gift that Jesus gave us, and we get to take part in kind of opening that gift, embracing that gift, and unpacking that in our lives. Effort is involved, not in the obtaining of salvation, but the enjoyment of it and in the fullness of it. And so that is what we've been talking about. We started this series, of course, last weekend, and we talked a lot about how we as individuals are like a volcano, and that in my past, when there's stuff that happens in my story, when there's pain that hits in my story, there's unresolved kind of issues back there, which I think all of us are going to bump into at some point or another. If I don't do anything with those, if I don't process those properly, what's going to happen is, like a volcano, those are going to erupt in my life and will come and kind of damage and steal some of the joy and the purpose and the peace that we're designed to have and that Jesus died to give us. And so if you missed that first conversation, I encourage you to maybe catch up on our YouTube channel. You can subscribe there and catch up on other messages as well. But that one's a really important one, and I think maybe provide somewhat of a framework for our conversations here throughout this series. But this is what we're talking about. How do we kind of lean in and take effort and put our energy at things that are going to give us life? That's what we're diving into. And what we want to dive into specifically today is how do I do that in kind of the arena of my emotions, the arena of my emotions. And the reality is emotions have had an interesting relationship with the church over the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And sometimes we as the church have said, hey, emotions are powerful and they're kind of dangerous. So sometimes we've said, if you feel things, what you should do is essentially just put them away and ignore them. Just pretend like they don't exist. Don't even look at that thing. Just get it out of there, right? If I feel something, put it over here. And what I need to focus on instead is I just need to believe truth, which is, of course, super important. But what do I do with all of these emotions, right? When I bump into difficulty in life, how am I supposed to deal with that? When there is anger or grief or loss or sadness, when there's anxiety or loneliness, what am I supposed to do with that? Is there anything that my faith informs me to do or helps me with when I bump into those things? Or am I supposed to deal with that some other way? Right? Those might be questions that we would have as we start to unpack what does this kind of look like in my story and in my life. And one of the things I love that Jesus said, when asked what the greatest commandment was, he just jumped right in and answered this. It's probably a familiar verse if you grew up in church at all. He said this, something very simple and very profound. Matthew 22:37, he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. And this is a verse that is easy to hear. It's easy to memorize. It's easy to know this verse. Super challenging to put this into practice because that is a massive thing that Jesus just said here. Love the Lord with kind of everything you got, right? Your mind, your thoughts, your intellect, your emotions, your will, your choices, your volition, right? All that. Everything that you have, love God. That's what I'm asking you to do. Well, that's a big deal. And if that's what Jesus is talking about, then probably there's some emotions involved in that equation. I can't just ignore this entire dimension of my life. Things the Bible says that we're made in the image of God. And being made in the image of God, we're going to be people that are emotional and physical and intellectual. And actually, God is as well. God feels things. The Bible says that God is jealous. God is grieved. God rejoices. God has amazing amounts of emotion. It's just not something that maybe jumps to the forefront as we're reading through the Bible. But that's how he is, and that's how we are, and that's actually how we love God back, is there's emotions all kind of a part of the story. So I'm called to do this. Right? I'm called to do this love God thing from all different parts of life. How do I do that when it's a part of life that I don't quite understand? I did this exercise the other day. We went to this retreat, and the leader of the retreat had us spend some time and write down and answer questions. And the first question was how do you feel? I was like, I have no idea. Right? I have no idea. I'm like emotionally handicapped. I don't know how I feel. I got to stop and think about that and process that. And it's not always that clear to me how I feel, right? A lot of guys, we're kind of like this. Not all of us, right? But some of us and some ladies, we're like that too, where when it comes to the emotional part of our lives, we're not always quite sure what's going on and which emotion is being tapped into. But this is where God actually calls us to be honest. He calls us to kind of go there in our relationship with Christ. I love this passage. David is going to introduce us to this verse. David's a warrior. He's kind of a poet. He's a king. He's a tough guy. And one of the things I love about David is he's super honest about where he really is. even emotionally. Here's what he said, Psalm 51:6, "Behold, you desire truth in my innermost being, and in secret you will make wisdom known to me." David's saying, man, God wants honesty. He wants truth all the way down in there in my guts, in the innermost being. How do we do that? What does that look like? Let's start to unpack it here on the whiteboard. This is kind of how it makes sense to me, and maybe it'll be helpful to you. And probably this is kind of how my experience of emotions tend to work. When I'm over here and I run into some kind of difficulty, right? Some kind of problem or situation that's challenging, and I feel the difficulty of that situation, what can happen, what usually happens to me, is I want to get out of this situation as fast as humanly possible. All right, when I'm feeling lonely or sad, I want to not be sad anymore. When I'm feeling grief, I want to not be grieving anymore. Right? I think we're all like that. Like, please just make it go away. Is there like an off switch? Can we just turn this thing off and make it stop? And I think if you're a follower of Jesus, right, I would be this way too, is where I want to land is I want to land in a good place. I want to land over here, and I want to view my circumstances the way that God views my circumstances. I want to land with God's perspective. Let's see if I can spell that. There we go. Right? I want to land with God's perspective. I want to just kind of skip over this entire valley of difficulty right here and land in a place where I'm like, man, I see my difficulties and look back at them the way that God would look at them. I want to see it. I want to process emotion like that. I wish I could get out of this and just skip over to this side. I want to see God's kind of reality. Now, what is rough and is a part of the journey, and we're not always sure what to do with it, is being a human being, I have to go through this valley and land over here through a process that we're just going to call, for the sake of the conversation, honesty. Honesty. And let me just tell you, I just want to skip this guy real bad. I want to just jump right over being honest and go from I'm in pain, this terrible thing happened, this super frustrating thing happened, and now I jump over here and I see it the way that God sees it. Now, can we do that with some things? Sure, right? Some small things that happen in a day that aren't that big of a deal. We don't have to go through like this massive gnashing of teeth, deep process to do that, right? I can just kind of jump to God's perspective. But most things that like really actually are causing me to struggle and tapping into real emotion, I'm gonna need to go down into the valley, and I'm gonna have to be honest about how I actually really feel, and then I can begin to find my way out of that valley. In fact, this is the pattern that many of the Psalms would fall into. So this is the book of the Bible. David wrote a bunch of them, and he would start out and say, in essence, things like this: God, why have you left me? Have you forsaken me? Are you still with me? Right? Like, are we okay still? And he would start off in difficulty. My enemies are against me. They are attacking me. Like, what's happening? And he would start to express a great deal of honesty as he starts to express his heart. I would argue a level of honesty that probably makes most of us, me too sometimes, uncomfortable. Like, super honest. To the point where if we looked at what David said in isolation when he's asking questions like, God, where are you? Have you left me? We might look at him and say, ooh, are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to feel those things? Are you allowed to ask those questions? I don't know that we've always created or allowed space for ourselves and for each other to go there, right? If we were in the middle of a difficult thing, probably we would feel tempted when interacting with each other, if we're followers of Jesus, we've been in the church a while, to look at somebody who's in a difficult place and then quote them a Bible verse, right? It's okay. God works all things together for good for those who love him. Is that true? Yes, that's the answer you should say. Yes, that's true, right? That's a true statement. It's absolutely true. If I'm in the middle of severe pain or difficulty or deep frustration, is it helpful for me when somebody tells me that verse? Not in the moment. What's helpful? What's helpful is when I can open up and tell you what I'm really thinking and really feeling, and then in time, make my way up out of the valley and land in the right place. That's actually how it works. That's actually how it works with each other, right? When we're in relationship with one another and one of us is struggling, if you're in a marriage relationship or you're in a parenting relationship, you can look at your kid or your friend or your spouse and say, here's the right answer, you should believe it. We can do that, or we could listen to one another and meet somebody where they are, right? And then help them gently move towards truth and reality. That's how we want to be interacted with, and that's actually how God wants to interact with us. Now, here's what can happen. I know that for many of us, we're tempted to skip over this guy. And what that can look like, if I was describing what that looks like, it looks like not owning how deeply I'm affected by either my current circumstances or my past circumstances. Oh yeah, growing up in that divorce home, that didn't really affect me that much. I'm kind of over it now. Oh, did you like work through that at all, or work through forgiveness? Did you ever think, no, I'm good. Okay, right? Losing someone really close to us. I'm good, victory in Jesus. I'm great, they're in heaven, see you later. Whoosh. Is that true? If that person knew Jesus, that they're in heaven? Absolutely. Am I being honest about the reality of the loss that I just faced? Probably not. Right? Another way this can look is, you know what I'm going to do? I don't want to be here, and I don't want to go here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get really, really busy. Like really super busy. I'm going to involve myself in everything under the sun. I'm going to get 5 jobs. I'm going to be a part of 7 clubs. I'm going to play every sport known to man. I'm going to play an enormous amount of video games because that helps, right? I'm so busy. I'm going to do everything I can because I just do not want to go here and I don't want to live here any longer. Help me just kind of avoid everything and try to find my way over to this place. That's one option. It's one temptation. The other temptation, as I interact with myself and I interact with other people, is I can go down into this valley and camp out here. I can kind of live down here and stay here and maybe never make my way up. And that's probably, if we're honest, a fear that many of us would have about being honest. And if I really opened up, if I really went there, what if I got lost down there and I never could find my way out of it? If I opened up that box that I covered up and I locked and I sealed and we don't go there anymore, we don't talk about that thing that happened, it blew up and it hit the fan, but we duct taped it and we dug a hole and we buried it and if I got to dig that back up, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know what's going to happen, right? And we can get stuck down here if we're not careful and never make our way back up to God's perspective. What I fear, probably for us who grew up in the church, is this. I fear not creating enough space for us to be honest, I think this is absolutely critical for us, that this is incredibly damaging over time. I think it's more dangerous to do this than to risk going into the valley and being worried I'm not going to come back up out of it. Because when I gloss over and I bury and I won't talk and I won't go there, I won't touch it, what's going to happen is the volcano is going to erupt. It's going to explode. It's going to eat my lunch. Right? It's just going to happen. Eventually, it's going to show up in this massive way. In general, if we have sincere hearts and we're open and we're honest, I think the Lord is faithful to lead us up out of that canyon, out of that valley, and help us find our way to God's perspective and to a sane assessment of reality. You know, I've been thinking a lot about it. When we look at what God says and we agree with it, that is being sane. That's a sane perspective of the world. I think we want that. We want to land there. We want to go there. As a human being that is weak, I have to process through it in this way. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to give you this example from the life of Jesus. And remember, of course, Jesus is God. He is perfect, right? He's morally perfect. He never sinned. And you got to see this. I'm blown away that this is captured in the Bible for everybody and anybody to read for all of the future right after it was written. Here's what we have as Jesus makes his way to the cross. He stops and prays in the Garden of Gethsemane. He spends some time there, and he interacts with God the Father. And remember, he's at the end of this mission that God has placed him on the planet for. He knows he's there on purpose. He knows what he's come to do. And the weight, the enormity of the weight of this task is crushing him. I thought Jesus is the Son of God. He's like Superman. No, he's human. He's the God-man. Is he God? Yes. Is he human? Yes. Does that make sense? It's challenging, right? But that's the tension of what the Bible creates for us. The God-man in his humanity feels the weight and the burden, the difficulty of being the Savior of the world. What I find fascinating is he doesn't pretend that it's easy, and he doesn't pretend that it doesn't affect him. And you got to see this. Look at what he says, Matthew 26, 37, 38. He took Peter and two sons of Zebedee, his three guys that are really close in with him, and along with him, he said, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. I need you to hear that. Jesus said that. He said, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. If Jesus is allowed to feel like that, are you allowed to feel like that? Yes. If Jesus was troubled and sorrowful and overwhelmed, are you allowed? Is there room for you to be? Yes. Right? In our passion for wanting to lock into the truth, which is extraordinarily important, I get that. What we can do is not allow ourselves enough space and not allow each other enough space to be a human being. And I need that space. And you need that space. We need the space for emotion, and we need the space for questions. We need the space sometimes even for doubt. Why? Because Jesus asked us to love him with all of our heart, our soul, our mind, and our strength. And if I'm going to do that, I can't I can't surface it, I can't fake it, I can't give you a slice of me. I'm trying to give you all of who I am. That's what I'm asked for. Jesus wants my heart. He would look back at me and say, it's not enough. I want the ugly. I want the raw. I want the real. I want the rest. And you're like, man, I don't know. Are you sure? Yep. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death, Jesus says. And I think it's so important that we see this. So important. Why? Because this has to actually work in practice. Because I'm going to get hit by the boulder. I'm going to have difficult things happen to me, and so are you. And when that happens, I got to know what to do with it. And there's a huge part of me that wants to say, I just wish the answer was just to say, suck it up to myself. And sometimes it kind of is, right, about small stuff. But when not the rocks or the pebbles of life, but the boulders hit me, that doesn't work. It doesn't work. You know it, and I know it. I got to go through the valley. And I want us just to take a minute and see some principles, some things that Jesus did. I want us to observe what Jesus did in this situation. I think we can take these home with us. Here's what Jesus did. He did 5 things that I think are going to be super helpful for us just to put some practicality to it. Here's what he did. He allowed people, he trusted to see his emotions and to share in his difficulty. He didn't have to do that. Jesus could have gone to that garden alone. In fact, most of his times are spent in solitude with God the Father. He'll do that here, but he invites people in. And when I'm overwhelmed, and when it's over my head, and when the grief is searing, and when the volcano is erupting, man, I gotta hit the emergency brake and say, who is the trusted friend, the trusted spiritual leader? Who's the person I can call to say, hey man, I actually need you. I need to share this burden with you. Please help me here. This guy named Larry Crabb, he's a Christian counselor, pretty well-known guy, wrote some great books. He came out about 20 years ago and he said this. He said, in all of my practice of counseling, professional counseling, my conclusion is that what the average person needs to be healthy is not so much counseling, but he said about 90% of the time, and I'm sure he's generalizing, he would say this: what most people need are solid Christian friendships. If I could go to somebody that I knew and that I trusted with my real problems, and we could share and love each other through the valley and up and out of it to God's perspective over time and with gentleness, that would be enormously helpful for each of us. Right? He allowed people in. Here's the next one. He was honest about how he really felt. He's honest about how he really felt. There are events that have happened to you and to me that have impacted us. The things that we're not quite sure what to do with. And when we're honest and we take the time to see it, there's emotion under there that we're not quite sure where to put it. Jesus got a hold of that emotion and he communicated it. And even if it looks like saying, I don't even know what to do with where I am, that's a great start. Looking at a brother or a sister, a friend, and saying, I need you to help me. Here's the next one, right? To actually ask for help. To actually ask for help. Jesus invited these men in. He said, hey, I need you to come watch with me. Did Jesus need those people? No, right? Probably not. He's the Son of God. But he invited these people in. He trusted them, shared himself with them. And then in this situation, he asked for help. Stay here and watch with me. And when we're in a situation where we are over our head and the difficulty is enormous, we got to ask for help. And I would say this too, guys. We need to be willing to help others, to be available and to be involved. And of course, that can't happen every time, but we're going to need each other. One of the best things that communicates the love of Jesus, the most powerful pictures, is when God's children, his followers, look at each other and say, I'm going to bear your burden. There's no benefit to me. This doesn't help me in any way. I'm just going to love you. I've chosen to love you. Why? Because God has chosen to love me. I've been loved, and so I'm going to love. Right? He asked for help. Here's the next one. He spent time alone with God, being honest about how he felt. This is where it has to get all the way to me and God. It has to get all the way to this point, right? Where I actually open up and I land in a place where God wants to land. Here's the last one. He landed in agreement with God's perspective. Man, I think these 5 things, they're not perfect, they're not complete. Are they incredibly helpful for us? Oh my goodness. Incredibly helpful. That if I actually took what I had and faced it and walked through that journey, I think we would find enormous health in and through it. And I think the volcano would look very, very different. I remember a handful of years back, this man came to me, and he wanted to meet with me. And this, of course, happens sometimes, as a pastor, where somebody will ask to meet, and I really don't have any idea what we're going to talk about. I kind of like that. It's fun. And we sat in my office. I kind of knew the guy, and sat down. He's a sincere guy, and I knew that we were going to talk about something important as I looked at his face. And he started opening up to me a little bit, and he started to share his story. The guy had been in the church a long time, and he said, Ryan, I'm not sure how to move past something that's happened in my past. I don't know what to do with it. And he began to tell me the story of, I think it was 12 years earlier, how he and his wife had been pregnant, and their pregnancy came to term, and the child was stillborn, born dead. And he said, when this happened, he said, I looked at this child, and he said, I can remember it like it was yesterday. Tears start coming down his face. And he said, ever since that event happened, I've had this enormous distance between me and God. And he says, I don't know what to do with what happened back here. He said, I don't know why it happened, and I don't know what to do with it. And I don't know where to go from here. And he sat in my office, and he cried, and it was a safe place. And I looked at him, and I said, brother, I don't have answers. I have no idea why this happened. I don't know. And I don't know what you've gone through over these last 12 years. But here's what I want you to know, I said. What I want you to know is that God is not looking at you thinking that you are a failure because you couldn't bear this alone. He's not looking at you saying, well, why don't you suck it up and have more faith during this time? He's not doing any of that. I said, you know what? Do you know what the heart of your Father is for you? I said, bro, God misses you. He misses his son. These 12 years of distance have broken his heart mainly because he misses you. He cried. And he looked at me and said, what do I do, man? I said, here's what I think you should do. I said, I think you should take a day off work. I think you should go out into the woods. I think you should go be as honest as you can possibly be with God. I think if you have a question, you should say it out loud. You have a frustration, you should get it off your chest. I think you should just unload it all. He was kind of like, is that okay? I said, absolutely. Let it all out. This guy was a father, and I asked him, and when your kids are hurting, what do you want them to do? He said, I want them to come to me. What if they're mad at you? I still want them to come to me. It's the same with God the Father. He just misses you. And he wants to be in the center of your life again. He said, all right, I'm going to go do it. I said, okay. And he went out and he did it. He said, Ryan, I did it. I did everything you said. I said everything on my mind. I even cussed. I asked all my questions. I was exhausted. I was crying. I was snotting, the whole thing. Right? He said, when I was exhausted, I was able to find myself coming back and recognizing that God was there the whole time and landing in a place where I said, God, I want you. I want to follow you. I want to know you. I want to live life with you. Some version of that is where he landed. He said, I can't tell you how important it was that I did that. Because I could have gone another 20 years. I could have gone to my deathbed. Is that this stuff matters so much. It matters so much. And I need you to know that whatever it is that's back here, if it's current, if it's historical, that you have a God that can handle your feelings and your questions and your doubts. Not only can he handle them, he's inviting you. Saying, I want you to walk it through with me like a good father would. So guys, here's where I'm going to land with us today. And I know for some of us, I'm pressing. I realize that. Here's what I'm asking you to do. Faith or no faith, crazy past or no crazy past, wherever you are, I would love for you to take me up on this one challenge this week. I want you this week to spend a chunk of time alone and in silence. Alone and in silence. I recommend be in the woods because I love the woods. Right? Go outside, it's beautiful. Put away the phone, the laptop, or the device. Get a Bible, get a notebook, and actually let yourself be honest about whatever comes to mind. Nothing comes up, you just had a neat half hour by yourself with the Lord, right? That's what it is. Or you might process the most important stuff you've ever processed. I don't know. But here's the thing. I'm asking you to actually do it. I'd like you to take out your phone and we're going to make an appointment right now to do it. I'll wait. Right? I'm serious. I want you to do it. actually take, I don't care if it's a half hour or an hour, whatever you can handle. What do you have to lose? 20 minutes, disconnected from the device, disconnected from conversation and media, and just allow yourself to be quiet and alone. Make the appointment. Find it, however much you think you can handle, however much you think you might need. And put it in like it's a lunch meeting with somebody. Just plug it in right now. Worst thing that's going to happen is you waste a little bit of time. Or, man, it might change the game for you. Guys, this stuff matters. It matters a ton. As the band comes out, we're going to sing and worship. But I just want you to know the reason I press on this so deeply is as a pastor and a leader in full-time ministry, I've been doing this stuff since 2004, this is the stuff that creates change. And frankly, I'm just not that interested in doing anything that doesn't rock us and change us and move us forward. Life is just too short. Jesus didn't come here to make a club. He came here to change our lives. If you want in on that, I think you're going to find it. I want more of it. We need Jesus. He wants to be with us. Would you pray with me? Father, this doesn't all make sense to me. Why sometimes I feel so needy and weak and so impacted by things that weren't even my choice. Lord, I'm really, really glad that you want to be in the thick of that with me. That you're willing to meet me in questions and emotions and even doubts. And that your heart is good enough and your faithfulness is strong enough to move me up out of the valley. And God, I pray for each of us here that you would prepare our hearts to be alone with you this week. Maybe in a way that we haven't been in a long time, or for some of us, we've never done this. And God, I pray that you would work with power in those moments. Because I want life. And Lord, I want that for everyone who's here right now. We are jealous to have your best. Lord, give us the courage to move towards it, even now.